Welcome back to our verse-by-verse journey through the book of Proverbs. I'm Pastor Lance, and this is episode 7. Now, before we dive into chapter 7, let's do a quick recap, because Solomon has been building an argument across several of the chapters that we've looked at now, and it helps us to see the whole structure. In chapter 1, Solomon introduced us to the idea of wisdom and to folly, her loud and dangerous rival. Chapter 2 told us wisdom must be actively pursued like a man digging for buried treasure. Chapter 3 gave us that magnificent command to trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and warned us not to be wise in our own eyes. Chapter 4 let us hear David's own voice, the warrior king pouring wisdom into his son like a man who knows what it cost him not to have it. And chapters 5 and 6 got specific. We read about the predatory lender, the ant's economics, 7 things that God calls abominations, and a fire metaphor about the damage that folly does. Some choices don't burn you slowly, they kind of explode, they detonate. Well, now we come to chapter 7. And if the previous chapters were Solomon warming up, this is the main event. He tells a story, a vivid, detailed, almost cinematic story. And it's one of the most psychologically acute portraits of temptation and self-destruction in all of ancient literature. So buckle up, because here we go. Proverbs chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. My son, keep my words and treasure my commands within you. Keep my commands and live, and my law as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you're my sister, and call understanding your nearest kin, that they may keep you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words. Solomon opens with urgency. We see it in the words keep, treasure, guard. These aren't casual suggestions. No, they're words of a man who knows the stakes. That phrase, apple of your eye, is one of those idioms that's so old that we use it without even thinking about it. What does it mean? Well, in the ancient world, the pupil of the eye, that tiny dark window, it was called the little man. Because when you were close enough to someone to look into their eyes, you saw a small reflection of yourself. But to be that close to someone meant that that person had let you in. And they let you in that close because you mattered to them. Okay. How did the pupil become an apple in our English translations? I'm glad you asked. It's an artifact of translation from the original Hebrew to Old English. In Old English, the word apple was a synonym for round, because most of their apples were just that, they were round. They weren't the hybrids that we have today, that juicy red Washington delicious that many prefer now. So in Old English, it was common to refer to the pupil as the apple of the eye. If we were doing a straight translation of the Hebrew, we'd say the little man of the eye. But to English speakers of 500 years ago, that would have totally missed their understanding of what Solomon was saying. So the translators used apple of the eye because their goal was to render the meaning of the phrase, not just a straight translation of the Hebrew words. The apple of the eye was something held at the center of your most intimate vision. Solomon urges his son to hold wisdom there, not on a shelf, not putting it in a notebook. It's at the center of what he sees. The seeing meaning a right comprehension of what's real. There's something kind of paradoxical in these opening verses. The wisdom that keeps you from temptation is the wisdom you internalized before the temptation arrived. That's the idea here. And most only think about self-control when the seduction stands in front of them and the battle's half over. Well, Solomon knows that. And so the command tied to your fingers, the instructions written on your heart, those aren't merely decorative like the phylacteries of later Orthodox Jews. They're a pre-installed filter through which every appeal to folly has to pass. In verse 4, we find this, say to wisdom, you are my sister. In the ancient Near Eastern world, a man's sister was under his protection, and he was under hers. She was family, unchosen and permanent, someone who had no motive other than his welfare. While folly flatters, wisdom is family. One tells you what you want to hear, the other tells you what you need to here. The Romans understood this tension. When a victorious general rode through the city of Rome in a triumph, which was the highest honor that Rome could bestow, he would ride on a gilded chariot, white horses drawing it, the crowd roaring, but a slave stood directly behind him, tasked with whispering in his ear, "Remember, you are mortal." It wasn't to spoil the parade, it was to keep the man from becoming intoxicated by it. Wisdom is that voice. It doesn't ruin the party, it just keeps you from dancing off the edge of the roof. Okay, verses 6 through 13. "For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice and saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths, a young man, devoid of understanding, passing along the street near her corner. And he took the path to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. And there a woman met him, with the attire of a harlot, and a crafty heart. She was loud and rebellious. Her feet would not stay at home. At times she was outside, at times in the open square, lurking at every corner. And so she caught him and kissed him with an impudent face. She said to him," let's pause right there. Now Solomon does something unusual for the wisdom literature of the ancient Near East. He tells a story. It's not a parable exactly. It's more like a case study. He positions himself at the window of his house. He's looking out through the lattice onto the street below, and he watches. What he sees, he recounts to his son. Now, for sure, this is a literary device, but it's also remarkably realistic, isn't it? Solomon is not pronouncing from on high. He's saying, "I've seen this. I've watched this happen. What I'm about to tell you, it isn't mere theory." The young man that he observes is described precisely. He's devoid of understanding. The Hebrew word means that he lacks heart. In Hebrew anthropology, the heart was the center of thought, will, moral judgment, and desire. It was the whole integrated person. To be devoid of understanding was not to be stupid. It was to be disintegrated, unformed. A person with the accelerator fully depressed, but no steering wheel. Note the time of this story. It was in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. Solomon spends 3 phrases on this detail. That isn't merely poetic padding. The young man is not walking the street at noon on his way to the market. No, he's wandering in darkness. The ancient world's universal idiom for a moral no man's land where accountability becomes invisible and impulse, raw desire, takes over. The woman who meets him is also described precisely. She has, quote, "the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart," unquote. Her appearance advertises one thing. The interior is something else entirely. She's loud, rebellious, with feet that won't stay home. She's restless, hunting. The young man did not run into her by accident. She catches him. She kisses him. She puts on her face. The word translated impudent here is literally strengthened or hardened. It's a professional face, one adopted to secure a desired end. And then she begins to talk. Verse 14, "I have peace offerings with me. Today I've paid my vows. So I came out to meet you, diligently to seek your face. And I have found you. I have spread my bed with tapestry, colored coverings of Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. For my husband is not at home. He's gone on a long journey. He's taken a bag of money with him and will come home on the appointed day." It's the oldest sales technique in history. Make the mark feel chosen. She doesn't say, "I'm available for a price." It's, "I've been looking for you." Yeah. The religious veneer of verse 14 is deliberate and calculated. She claims she's just come from offering her peace vows at the temple. In other words, she's a good girl, fresh from worship. In the context of ancient Israelites, peace offerings were communal meals where the worshiper ate part of the sacrifice. So she's saying she has food. She has a religious alibi. She presents herself as a pious woman overwhelmed by this particular young man's attractiveness. He didn't pursue her. She came to find him. Oh, what an honor. If he believes any of this, he's a fool. And Solomon is watching him be one. The bedroom, she tells him, it's all prepared. Egyptian linen, the finest of the ancient world. Hey, If you wanted to communicate luxury and expense, Egyptian textiles were the ancient equivalent of a 5-star hotel suite. She speaks of myrrh and aloes and cinnamon. These are expensive aromatics imported from Arabia, South Asia, used in the temple worship and royal households. She's describing a sensory experience engineered to overwhelm him. Her husband? He's conveniently gone, conveniently wealthy, conveniently absent for a fixed known period. Solomon's implied commentary is devastating. None of it's true. The harlot doesn't have a wealthy traveling husband. She didn't prepare the room for her target specifically. She would have said every word of this to any passerby who showed half a heartbeat of interest in her. He just happened to be the one passing. He's not special to her. He's dinner, a car payment, a pair of shoes. And here's the insidious genius of the appeal. It's designed to tell him exactly what he wants to hear at exactly the moment he's most susceptible to hearing it. That susceptibility, though, remember, was chosen by him. He took the path near the corner of her house, in the dark. Verse 21, with her enticing speech, she caused him to yield. With her flattering lips, she seduced him. Immediately he went after her, as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks, till an arrow struck his liver. As a bird hastens to the snare, he did not know it would cost his life. The word immediately in verse 22, chilling detail. After all of that, the elaborate costume, the religious cover story, the luxury pitch, the appeal to desire and vanity, the young man's resistance collapses. Not gradually, not after wrestling with his conscience through the night, immediately. Solomon deploys 3 images in rapid succession, and they build on each other. The first is an ox going to slaughter. The ox doesn't know what the slaughterhouse is. It follows the path because it's what animals do. There's no drama, there's no struggle, no moment of tragic recognition. It simply walks to its doom. The second image is a fool in the stocks. The stocks, it's a punishment device set up in the town square, immobilizing the condemned for public ridicule, were actually a deterrent as much as a punishment. The shame of being seen was half the point. The threat of that shame kept many people in line. But the young man has walked into the stocks while trying to avoid exactly the kind of shame the stocks represented. The third image is a bird flying into a snare. Here Solomon introduces the most ironic image of the 3. The bird is hasty, it rushes, it moves quickly towards what appears to be food or safety or pleasure, and the quickness itself is what makes the trap work. A slower bird might have noticed the wire. This one doesn't. That phrase, till an arrow struck his liver, is anatomically grim. In the ancient Near East, the liver was considered the seat of the deepest emotions, not merely an organ, but the center of a person's vitality. An arrow to the liver was not a surface wound, it was mortal. What looked like an encounter has become an execution, and he never felt it coming until it had already sunk deep. Solomon's 3 images describe the same psychological mechanism. The person who walks into ruin without understanding what they're walking into because they've not been thinking, they've been feeling. Listen, this isn't mere moralizing. Modern psychology has a robust literature on what researchers call hot cognition. It's decision-making that occurs when the brain's reward circuitry is activated and the prefrontal cortex, responsible for consequence assessment, goes quiet. The ancient wisdom of Proverbs and the modern science of neurology are describing the same phenomena with different vocabulary. When the appetite is aroused, judgment takes a holiday. Solomon knew it 3,000 years before the first MRI scanned it. Verse 24, now therefore listen to me, my children. Pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For she has cast down many wounded, and all who were slain by her were strong men. Her house is on the way to hell, descending to the chambers of death. Solomon steps out from behind his window. The story's over. The lesson begins. And notice, he speaks to his children here, plural, in verse 24, as he had done earlier in chapter 4. This is not just for the son Rehoboam anymore. This is for every young man and woman in Israel who will ever encounter this temptation in any of its forms. Verse 26 contains what may be the most sobering lines in this chapter. Quote, All who were slain by her were strong men, unquote. They weren't weak. They weren't unstable. These were not men heading for obvious trouble. They were strong, capable, celebrated, powerful men. Solomon had watched this pattern play out enough times to know the strength that makes a man successful in every other arena does not immunize him against this particular vulnerability. If anything, success can become a liability in the pride that whispers, I can handle this. I'm not like other men. The strongest men in Israel's history fell right here. Samson, whose physical strength was legendary, was undone by exactly this kind of woman. Solomon himself, and let's not miss the profound irony of the wisest man in the world, writing a warning that his own life violated. He eventually accumulated 700 wives and 300 concubines, many of them foreign women who, we read, turned his heart after other gods. He's writing this warning at some level as a man who watched himself become the cautionary tale. Verse 27's geography is final. Her house is the way to Sheol. It's not a detour. It's not a rough neighborhood. It's a road that leads to death. Solomon has been using the road metaphor throughout chapters 1 through 7. The path of wisdom that grows brighter, the way of the wicked that descends into darkness, the harlot's house. It's not a destination, it's a point on a trajectory, and the trajectory goes one direction. It's worth pausing here to say that what Solomon's been implying and what he states plainly in verse 27's language about death and chambers of Sheol, the seductress in this chapter isn't merely a lesson about sexual morality, though it of course is that. She's Solomon's personification of folly itself. Sexual temptation serves as the controlling metaphor because it is, in Solomon's experience and observation, the most compelling and destructive form of temptation human beings regularly face. But the way of thinking that he describes is the same that's at work in every form of folly. The flattery that makes you feel special, the false promise of reward without consequence, the careful preparation of the scene, the invitation issued under cover of religious respectability, the appeal to what you already want to believe, and the moment of immediately when the appetite overruns the judgment. So swap out the harlot for almost any other temptation: financial fraud, substance addiction, the narcotic pull of online outrage, the appeal of a theology that conveniently absolves you of everything inconvenient. And Solomon's anatomy of seduction maps onto all of them with disturbing precision. The book of Proverbs wasn't written as a guide to sexual ethics alone. It's written as a guide to reality. And the reality that it describes is this: folly is always more attractively packaged than wisdom. Folly flatters. Folly claims you're special, that the rules don't apply in your case, that this time it's going to be different. And folly always descends to the chambers of death. In contrast, wisdom doesn't flatter, it tells the truth. Wisdom says, I know what you want, I also know where that road goes. And because I'm your sister, because I actually want what's best for you, I'm going to tell you the truth. Listen, let's not leave this chapter at the level of abstraction. Solomon is being intensely practical, and his teaching carries wisdom for daily life, for your daily life, for my daily life. So, first, don't walk near her corner. Verse 8 says that the young man took the path to her house. He didn't stumble there, he chose the route. The single most effective strategy for resisting temptation, don't walk in its direction. I know that sounds obvious until you watch how many people engineer their lives to be accidentally in the position where the temptation they're trying to resist finds them. Paul tells Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:22 to flee youthful lusts. Don't negotiate, don't manage, don't just build stronger defenses, flee. David in Psalm 101 verse 3 declared, quote, I will set nothing wicked before my eyes, unquote. Job in chapter 31 verse 1 said that he had made a covenant with his eyes not to look lustfully. These are not the strategies of weakness. They're the strategies of men who understood exactly what it was that they were dealing with. The young man in Proverbs 7 stayed to listen. He let her talk. He let the flattery accumulate. He let the pitch build to its conclusion. We read, quote, with her enticing speech, she caused him to yield, unquote. That word caused there implies sustained, persistent effort. She worked on him and wore him down. The problem is not that he lacked willpower at the critical moment. The problem is that he chose to stand there for the entire presentation. Now, second, let wisdom speak first. Now, verses 1 through 5 of chapter 7, they're not a preamble. They're the method. The woman who made it to wisdom's filter, who was assessed through the lens of God's truth before she ever opened her mouth, looks very different from the woman encountered with no filter in place. The same appeal lands differently in a mind furnished with wisdom than in a mind that is, as Solomon puts it, quote, devoid of understanding, unquote. Pre-commitment is not weakness. It's the architecture of wisdom built before the pressure arrives. And third, remember that you are not the exception. You're not. Verse 26 is addressed specifically to people who believe they're strong enough. They're the ones that Solomon has watched fall. The cockiest pilot in the squadron has the worst survival statistics. The CEO who's too experienced to listen to the compliance department is the CEO who ends up in federal court. The pastor who's mature enough to have a private life that bears no resemblance to his public one eventually detonates in front of his congregation. Humility is not just a Christian virtue. It's a human truth. The con the woman runs in Proverbs 7 isn't new. It is, in truth, the oldest con in the book. The apple in Eden was presented with the same basic sales strategy. This will make you like God. The rules don't apply to you. This is good. It's desirable. It's wisdom. Look at how attractive it is. It's already in your hand. Folly's been running this play since the garden. The costumes change. The props get updated. The cultural references shift. But the structure is identical. Flatter the target. Minimize the consequence, make the forbidden feel like the obvious, correct choice, and wait for the moment when desire outpaces judgment. So here's Solomon, looking out his window, watching a young man walking towards his own ruin. He writes it all down so his son, so all of us can see the mechanism before it closes around us. That's what a father does with hard-won wisdom. He describes the trap in enough detail that you recognize it before you're in it. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Not because God is a killjoy who wants to take away the things that look attractive, but because He's the only one who can see the whole road from the beginning to the end, who knows where every path actually leads, and who loves us enough to tell us the truth about it before we find out the hard way. The young man in chapter 7 had the information available. He had a father and teachers and a whole tradition of wisdom literature telling him exactly where that corner led. He just didn't internalize it deeply enough for it to matter when the moment came. You see, the question is not whether folly will make its pitch to you. It will. It does. It's professional and persistent, and it's very good at its job. The question is whether wisdom is already on the inside when it does. And next time we move into chapter 8, and we hear a very different voice calling in the streets. Not a seductress, not a con. Wisdom herself steps forward and speaks. And what she says about herself is one of the most extraordinary passages in the entire Old Testament. So don't miss it. Until then, as I said before, stay on the path.